Hello there, fandoms of the world. My name is TheGeekTheorist, and welcome to my channel. Since this is my first video on this channel, allow me to give a brief overview of some of the expectations you as a viewer should have as far as content goes. First off, I should be uploading a lot of fan theories / fan related videos, as the name would suggest. However, depending on what kind of reception this content gets, and whatever else y'all want to see, I'm willing to try anything, whether that be let's plays, rants on topics outside of geek-related topics, or whatever. With that out of the way, let's get into the topic of this video. For my first theory, I wanted to talk about something that's important to me personally, and with Volume 4 of Roosterteeth's RWBY just on the horizon, I knew that the perfect topic for this video would be one of my favorite ships of all time, Bumblebee. My theory is as follows. Bumblebee will become canon, and is the ultimate endgame for Blake and Yang. Now, if you clicked on this video, you're probably already a fan of RWBY, and I don't need to explain the series to you, so I won't waste anyone's time with that. However, if you're a fan but haven't seen all of the volumes 1 through 3, pause this video now and go watch them. Otherwise, let's begin by laying out the points I'll be attempting to make. These points are: 1. Blake Belladonna and Yang Xiao belong together in the context of the show. In other words, they work together as a couple personality-wise. And 2, the creators of the show intend for them to end up together, and have already begun planting the seeds for Bumblebee to grow. Now that being said, let's delve right into point number 1. Point number 1, Blake and Yang work together as a couple, character-wise. Now, I briefly touched on this in a Tumblr post of mine, along with a few other topics relating to these two, and I'll be sure to include the links to these posts down in the description. Now, however, I have the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth with my analysis of these characters. First, let's start off with Yang Xiao. On the surface, this blonde brawler exudes confidence and a headstrong attitude. She's easily fired up and can often get herself into trouble as a result of her quick temper. Blake Belladonna, on the other hand, is quiet and reserved, preferring the comfort of a book over the idea of socializing. She has a troubled past which she likes to keep concealed for the most part, just like her faunus ears, which she hides behind a bow. At first, these two seem like complete opposites, but don't worry, I'll spare you the opposites attract argument. Because although on the surface the two women appear to have little in common, when you dig a little deeper, it's easy to see how their personalities complement each other, highlighting one another's strengths and helping with their weaknesses. For example, as previously stated, Yang's rashness can often result in her accidentally putting herself in danger. Blake, however, calculates each move before making it, her wit and careful planning lending to her fighting style, similar to that of a ninja. Where Yang falters, Blake makes up for it, and the two of them working together make an almost unstoppable force. However, combat style alone does not a good couple make, so allow me to explain even further. To do so, let's take a look at one of my favorite episodes of RWBY, Burning the Candle. In this episode, Blake becomes so obsessed with fighting the White Fang that she begins to lose sleep and is unable to focus on anything except taking down the corrupt organization. So then, who is able to break her out of this obsessive mindset? None other than Yang, who confronts Blake in an attempt to empathize with her and convince her to come to the Beacon dance, which we'll talk about more later on in the video. During this confrontation, Yang explains that she, too, has a goal that she is pursuing, that being finding her mother. However, Blake cannot allow her pursuit to destroy her. We see here again that the two girls have a lot more in common than what lies on the surface. They both will tirelessly chase after a goal until they achieve it, Blake being taking down the White Fang, and Yang's being finding her mother. And when it comes to this similarity, we also see how their personalities work so well together. Yang is able to show a more tender, comforting side, and helps Blake to get out of a destructive mindset. With Yang revealing this side of herself that we don't often see, she is able to convince Blake to take some time off from her mission and attend the dance. This is what Blake needs in a partner. Just as Yang needs someone who will protect her from rushing into things, Blake needs someone who can show sympathy towards her struggles, but also someone who will push her to new heights. The two complement each other to near perfection. Next, let's examine point number 2. The creators of RWBY intend for Blake and Yang to end up together, and have already begun planting the seeds for this relationship to grow. Now, I believe this point will be the more difficult point to prove, but nonetheless, allow me to try. And first, I just want to confirm that the folks at Roosterteeth have already stated that there are queer characters in RWBY. This means that the writers are already laying the foundation for some character or characters to be queer, and to me, those characters have to be Blake and Yang. I believe that this argument can best be made in regards to two scenes. The first being the confrontation in Burning the Candle that we've already discussed, and the second being the confrontation between Yang, Blake, and Adam at the end of Volume 3. So then, let's go back to Burning the Candle, and more specifically, the dance. I believe the scene in which the members of teams RWBY and Juniper are discussing Blake's current status is one of the first signs of Bumblebee moving towards becoming a reality. At the end of this scene, Yang states that Blake will be at the dance, with absolutely no doubt. This is very telling about the relationship between Blake and Yang. While nobody else believes they can convince Blake to come to the dance, Yang is sure that she will be able to. These two are very close. However, closeness does not necessarily mean romance. I know. That comes later. But I think this scene is interesting to note, especially when you consider what happens later in this episode. So, Yang and Blake have their talk, as we discussed already. The two embrace, and Yang goes to leave. Then, however, she turns around and says, "And if you feel like coming out tomorrow, I'll save you a dance," before following the statement up with a wink. To me, this line essentially proves that Yang has feelings for Blake. Imagine, if you will, that Yang were of the opposite sex and had delivered this line, along with the aforementioned wink. Nobody would be denying that the two have a romantic connection. However, because the two are both females, there are many people who still try to deny this. But let's look at what this line really means, shall we? Yang knew she could get Blake to come to the dance. She was so confident about it. And after their talk, in a final effort to convince Blake to come, she offered herself, as though this was her trump card. Nothing else about this scene really shows why Yang would have been so confident. I mean, sure, they talked things out, but Yang was absolutely certain that Blake would be at the dance. So then, it's reasonable to believe that the reason for her confidence was related to this final proposition. And if we acknowledge this, then we must also acknowledge the romantic connotation to this statement. Every other character interaction relating to the dance was within a romantic context, whether that be Weiss and Neptune, Weiss and Jean, Pyrrha and Jean, or even Sun and Blake, the former appearing to have some kind of crush on the latter. So then, within the context of the story, it's fair to assume that this statement also had some kind of romantic subtext. And if that wasn't clear enough, Yang literally seals the deal with a wink. It's not even subtext anymore. The wink makes it very clear that the proposition is romantic. And as we see, Blake does end up attending the dance, just as Yang knew she would. This scene is very telling as far as the relationship between the two is concerned, but we're not done there. Next, let's talk about the scene in which Blake and Yang confront Adam during the Battle of Beacon. Let's all agree that creators of media know what they're doing, whether that be writers, directors, editors, etc. A scene plays out in a specific order, with specific intent behind each word and action. This is how foreshadowing, symbolism, and other subliminal facets of a story can be woven throughout the narrative. This part of the argument leans heavily on this knowledge of creative intent, so just bear with me. And now that in mind, there is meaning to the confrontation between these three characters, and all of that subliminal meaning comes to a head when Adam delivers the line, "I will make it my mission to destroy everything you love." The immediate shot following this statement is of none other than Yang Xiao. And as if that wasn't enough, he follows up with, "starting with her." This could not be any more clear. The writers know what they're doing. They want the viewer to know that Yang is someone Blake loves. Adam sees in Blake's eyes that she loves Yang. He immediately picks up on it, and he tells Blake his intentions of taking Yang away from her. And finally, let's look at the underlying motivations behind this scene. It's apparent that Adam and Blake have some kind of romantic history together. He makes that very clear in his speech prior to Yang showing up. So then, obviously the person who gets his or herself involved should be the person who already has the most involvement in this confrontation. The person who will face Adam together with Blake. The person who is taking Adam's place by her side. And that person is Yang. Now, this next part includes a tiny bit of anti-Black Sun. So if you're a fan of that ship, and I don't know why you'd be watching this if you are, then I'd like to apologize in advance. However, a lot of people would argue that Bumblebee is not the ultimate intent of the writers, since Sun and Blake appear to have also made some kind of romantic connection. To that, I would direct you to the scene following the Atom confrontation, in which Blake and Yang are lying side by side before Blake grabs Yang's hand in tears and apologizes for what happened to her. When Blake grabs Yang's hand, we are treated to a shot of Blake and Yang in the foreground, while Sun looks on in the background. The message sent by this seemingly simple shot is clear. Sun is now separated from Blake and Yang, who are together. Sun was not the one who confronted Atom with Blake, and he is not the one that she is meant to be with. If you would argue that I'm simply reaching based on one shot, I would again argue that everything the creators have done is intentional. That shot was intentional. The perceived disconnect between Sun and Blake and the connection between Yang and Blake are both intentional. Each of these scenes that I've talked about demonstrate why Blake and Yang are going to be together, and why it is clear that the creators are intentionally moving the show in that direction. Bumblebee will be canon. So what do you think? Is Bumblebee going to happen? Or do you have another theory? Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and like and or subscribe if you like the video. Until next time.
But now there's rap game